All right, welcome on in everyone to this episode of First CSP, the channel dedicated to bringing you the first council shoulder patch issued from each council in Scouting America, both past and present. Today we're going to take a look at Gamehaven 299 out of Minnesota. Council was formed in 1925 as the merger of Rochester 293 and Winona 299. The current more recent collecting guides have the first issue broken into three variations, T1A, B, and C. However, those listings do change the order in which they were produced. Today, we are going to be working off of the older 2004 definitions, which actually had four variations for the T1, A, B, C, and D. I'm going to walk you through those as well as make connections to what's currently listed in the more recent 2023 Q3 guide so that you have a better understanding of how they've moved those classifications. Let's head on over to the patch table for the T1A. The T1A is listed the same in both the newer and older collecting guides, defined with its red border, white background, black fleur-de-lis, black letters, and a 42 millimeter state. Of the four issues that were produced, T1A, B, C, and D, two of them are going to have 42 millimeter states. We'll get the old measurement out here so you can see it just goes right past the four. The other state names on the subsequent patches, for the most part, are going to be much larger, except when we get to T1C. So this is the T1A. It is most specifically differentiated from the other version with the 42 millimeter state because it has a much more pronounced twill. So this is a rough twill left. It is a cloth back. All of these are going to be cloth backs except the very last issue, the T1D, will be a plastic back. So that is the T1A. Now the second patch produced, the T1B in the 2004 guide, then moves to a 60 millimeter name. It is a much larger patch. Put the ruler up here real quick. You can see that name is going almost all the way out to the 6 for the Minnesota. It would be very difficult to confuse this patch for the first. So the T1B in 2004's collecting guide lists this as red border, white background, black fleur-de-lis, and 60 millimeter state. So this is also a cloth back, similar production style, the T1B. We'll just leave the T1A up there at the top. Now, in the more recent guide, this would be classified as a T1C. There are two patches that have the larger state name, and those would both be considered, I guess, in the more recent guide as T1Cs. But as far as the actual order of production, going back to the older detailed guides, we have the T1A was the first. Again, we can see we're already into a smoother twill for the T1B, which had a larger state name. The T1C is the tricky one and can be confused with the first issue. We actually had a T1C that for years in our collection was actually listed as a T1A. And honestly, the Gamehaven patches themselves were what kind of started us down the road of collecting near issues to firsts to be able to illustrate we actually had the first. How do you know you have the first when some of these look so similar to one another? So you can see it's back to the 42 millimeter state name. The major distinction here again is going to be the rough twill on the T1A, whereas we have smooth twill on the T1C. Now it is identified that both left and right twill patterns exist for this T1C, but all of them are smooth twill, so not very pronounced compared with the T1A. In the most recent guide, these would be classified as T1Bs. Yeah, that gets very confusing. I do prefer, especially for Gamehaven, the older classification because I do think it's more clear and follows the order, I believe, of production. One other note with these T1Cs, is that they also have similar letters. I failed to mention with the T1B, they say that it is thicker letters, and you can see that Gamehaven Council is a much thicker text. We're back to the same standard size letters. They don't call them thin per se, but just standard size letters here on the T1C. This T1C also a cloth back patch. But these are the two you really have to be careful about. They are essentially the same size. They have very similar looks. It is going to be the distinction of the rough twill on the T1A that really is the deciding factor. You can see slight differences in the thickness here of the fleur-de-lis, but I will say trying to pick those out from singular photos, say on patch listings on auction sites or whatnot, can be exceptionally difficult to do. So that is the T1C. And then the last one is the T1D. T1D goes back to the larger state listing. The 2004 guide lists this as a 57 millimeter state, whereas the T1B it listed as 60. They're pretty similar and decidedly larger than the 42 millimeter state names. So T1D here has the red border, white background, black fleur-de-lis, black letters. They do list these as thin rings. They're not so much thinner, although the stitching just looks a little tighter. And most specifically, this is listed as having a plastic back, and it is a plastic backed patch for the T1D. Again, this first series of issues from Gamehaven for us were some of the most difficult to discern when just looking at images. And again, was kind of some of the inspiration of what we've done with the collection in trying to help others identify whether or not they have the first issue or what the first issue is by getting those near issues, those first issue variations, to be able to bring them to you. So for people who want to collect, hopefully you might be able to identify a first issue without having to collect everything, unless you just want to, in which case, by all means, it's been pretty fun. We hope you're enjoying it. We certainly are. But we wanted to be able to bring you the definitive presentation to help people with identifications, even just for, interesting historical purposes. So we hope you have enjoyed that. That is the first issues from Gamehaven. I hope you guys have enjoyed the episode. If you have questions or any comments, please leave those down below. Always love to be able to respond to those as we all learn from each other in these first issues from all the councils. We'll be back again tomorrow with another brand new episode. So we hope to see you then. We want to thank you very much for tuning in and sharing the videos, giving them likes. That really does help out the channel, and we appreciate it greatly. Until tomorrow, I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your day.